Hello and welcome. I'm Nandini Kashyap, Conference Director at Fierce Life Sciences. Thank you for joining us today's discussion on breaking the compliance bottleneck, scaling AI and innovation in regulated industries, brought to you by Fierce, Biotech, and Modus Create. This session is being recorded and you'll receive a link and additional resources shortly after. You can submit your questions through Q&A during the whole time, and we'll address as many as we can in our final segment. Now, let's talk about today's topic. In pharma, biotech, and healthcare, compliance has long been treated as a checkpoint, a final review at the end of the project, often performed by hands, often the reason a launch slips a quarter. That model has worked, but it isn't keeping up. Cloud is no longer future state, and AI is being applied in discovery, in clinical operations, commercial. And what we see, regulations are evolving in parallel. And the gaps now, how fast organizations want to move and how fast their companies' processes can move. And this has become one of the defining challenges in digital transformation in regulated industry. Therefore, we've started asking the question differently. Instead of how do we get compliance approved faster, we've started asking what if compliance lived inside the flow itself? Automated, continuously verified, and provable on demand. And that's the conversation we are having today. And to explore this topic, I'm joined with Alex Umha of Modus Create, Snehal Nahar of Amazon, and Danielle Morales of Modus Create. So please introduce yourselves to our audience. Alex, would you start us off?
Sure. Thanks, Nandini. So my name is Alex Ume, and I am a security architect at Modus Create. So a piece of my work sits at the intersection of security governance, cloud security, DevSecOps, audit readiness, modern security operations. So over the years, I've led and supported quite a bunch of security programs, security compliance programs across different regulated environments, including programs like ISO 27001 or the ISMS, PCI, HIPAA High Trust, even down to things like secure software delivery, identity governance, cloud security modernization. For me, one opportunity I see here is to move compliance closer to the work itself. So things like control, evidence, accountability are built into the way teams deliver rather than an afterthought. But yeah, that's me, Nandini. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Snehal?
Sure. Hey, hi everyone. I am Snehal Nahar. I am a principal technical account manager at Amazon, and I specialize in healthcare and life sciences industry. I work with some of the largest healthcare organizations and help them build securely and innovate on AWS while navigating the unique regulatory demands of this industry. The recurring issue that I see with the organizations is the organizations are adopting AI and cloud faster than their compliance processes can keep up with. So, not that they are stuck with the compliance, but the compliance really still lives in the spreadsheets instead of in the architecture. And that's what I am excited to dig into today.
Thank you, Snehal. Danielle?
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel. I'm a DevSecOps with more than 10 years experience working with Amazon and regulated industries on the part of compliancy and security. I'm also AWS lead for San Antonio community and community builder in cybersecurity. My job really is try to work on the pipelines and all the regulation on the companies to work on that. Yeah, most of this like CI/CDs, all the customized things that need to have in the cloud environments needs to work on these specific rule sets that we needed to work on. Yeah, but this is all my experience working with a lot of companies around the world, really to try to help them to be compliant in different EPA, SOX 2 and other ones in the market, and really thank you for being here and try to work with with the companies and the people that wants to be compliant.
So thanks, everyone. I'm so excited to dig into our discussion today. So I want to start where many of our leaders in our audience would like to start, with the bottleneck itself. And Snehal, you mentioned that you work across healthcare and life science customers every day. When organizations in regulated industries try to scale AI or digital initiatives, where do you typically get stuck? In your experience, is the problem a regulatory complexity? Is it a legacy processes or fragmented technology? Can you share some of your insights?
Yeah, it's honestly all of the above. But if I had to pick the root cause, it's really the organizational design. The compliance function and the engineering function, they operate really on different timelines and currently speak different languages. So here's what I see in practice, right? A development team builds, say, something really innovative. And say, for example, I can take a AI-powered clinical documentation tool. They move really fast, they iterate, and now with all the AI being there, they really get into the working type in like really days, right? And now when the prototype is ready, that's when it hits the compliance review. Now, suddenly they come to know it's kind of going to be 6 to 8 weeks of a process. You need to collect all the manual evidences, security questionnaires, architecture review boards that sometimes meet once a month. Now, by the time the whole review is approved and the compliance review is completed, the business case is already shifted or some competitor has moved ahead. So the real problem isn't that the regulations are too strict. If you look at from the healthcare perspective, you really need a rigorous oversight. The problem is that the compliance processes are still designed for waterfall delivery in a world that needs continuous deployment, right? So when you treat compliance as a gate at the end rather than a capability embedded throughout the life cycle, you are seeing something which becomes a bottleneck.
Danielle, do you want to add anything from your side, like engineering perspective?
Yeah, in the engineering perspective, of course, it's a lot of things that we need to have in mind when we want it to be compliant. First of all, on the part of the infrastructure side, um, how did you create your pipelines? How do you secure your infrastructure? And like, is encrypted in rest? Is encrypted in transit? Of course, this is a lot of work to do, especially if you have 100, 1,000 accounts and you need to management this. And it's crucial the pipelines and the life cycles that you are going to implement on your infrastructure needs to be secure. Yeah. In the end of the day, you need to have like this documentation or this knowledge to be compliant. This is crucial, something that I see with a lot of companies that wants to be compliant is that specific part, take their time. Yeah. Now with AI, of course, it's going to be in speed mode because we are going to have the AI help us. But yes, this is one of the bottlenecks that we see a lot with a lot of companies that we trying to be compliancy.
And what are the gaps between innovation and strategy and compliance execution? Maybe, Alex, you can take a stab at that.
Yeah, sure. So innovation strategy and compliance execution, one of the things that we see is they operate on different clocks, right? So as Nahal mentioned earlier, you have like different timelines. So on the business side, you want speed. Product teams are working in sprints. Engineering teams are deploying through CI/CD. Like even nowadays with AI, teams are experimenting like faster. Like everyone wants to be on the cutting edge, right? But on the other side, compliance is often still working as a final inspection model, like something that happens at the end. So the review typically happens late, like evidence is gathered after the fact, control owners are identified like much later in the processes. And at that point, organizations are no longer asking if they design the control correctly, but they are now more focused on how quickly can we prove that the evidence we have is acceptable, right? So that's where you start to see some of those bottlenecks. And in my experience, regulatory complexity is not really the problem. I mean, regulations are complex. That, yes, right, we agree. But a lot of the delays come with how these organizations operationalize compliance, right? So we find that policies live in documents, controls are living in spreadsheets, evidences lives in someone's inbox. Meanwhile, engineering is like blazing down the road and doing things somewhere else entirely. So the major gap here is really traceability, right? So leaders are finding it challenging to connect regulatory requirements to a control and that control to a technical implementation, and then that implementation to an evidence and that evidence to the live system states. So that's where we start to see where the chain gets weak. So when the chain is built into the workflow right from the start, then compliance starts to become more manageable.
That's so true. And Snehal had also raised a point that compliance shouldn't live at the end of the life cycle. So it should be woven in from day one. So something that keeps coming up is the term compliance as a code. So why don't we dig into that a little bit and help us understand? Maybe Danielle, when you say compliance as a code, what does that actually mean in practical terms? And maybe for people sitting in the audience, and even for me, can you help us understand in like plain, simple language what terms like DevSecOps, CI/CD mean, and how can they be used, or how are they being used now?
Yeah, especially when you're starting one project, you wanting to know what you are deploying. Yeah, one of the tools that like AWS have is CloudFormation. Yeah, CloudFormation is going to help you to customize and know what you are deploying. Yeah, um, CloudFormation have like all these different steps and in your code for what you are going to deploy. That is the way that you know that you are going to be compliant. Like you are using KMS for encryption at your database. You are using SSLs. You are using that your security groups is not exposing to internet. That your VPCs are very good customized for your security. All these things have mattered. Yeah. Right now, like AWS have tools like Audit and Security Hub and other ones that is interconnected and going to show you if you want to be compliant and going to show you, okay, you are like 55 or what is your right now compliancy that you wanted to know. And that is the key. Like if you are deploying a lot of AWS environments or resource, you need to know what you are deploying. And this is the core of this compliance as code, because in the end of the day, you're going to scan all your infrastructure, say, okay, everything is in place. You are compliancy on your structure side.
So I have a follow-up question to you, Danielle. If anybody else wants to add before I ask a follow-up question, Snail, Alex.
Yep.
So, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, no, so just to touch on a bit of that, taking up from Daniel. So CI/CD, DevSecOps, like you mentioned, are some of the modern ways that engineers have designed to push products and applications faster, right? So now you have a workflow where right from your development environment of writing code, you're able to push these products through a workflow where the application is built, anything else you want to run, if you're running security scans, if you need to run approvals, if you need to run raise change requests. So that entire pipeline from where you're developing a product up to the point where it's available for the end users is pretty much in summary what CI/CD does, right? And DevSecOps is essentially saying that within that workflow, what are some of the other things that we need to look out for beyond just the development, right? So, for instance, security or compliance, and that's exactly where things like security scanning, compliance as code would also fall in, like Daniel has mentioned.
So I did have a follow-up question to Daniel, but let me first ask a follow-up question to you, Alex. So So what are the things that should not be automated? Like you're talking about so much of compliance and automation. What things should not be automated according to you, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I'm pro automation. Like anything that can be automated, I will, right? But what should not be automated are things like risk acceptance, right? So at the end of the day, organizations would have an established risk appetite for specific risk scenarios, and those are the kinds of things you don't want to automate, right? You want to have a human in the loop reviewing that, ensuring that the risk scenario has been adequately treated for the context of the business. Things like exceptions, right? So when you have exceptions to a control, you don't want to have that being automated or automatically approved blindly, right? You want to have a human in the loop reviewing those exceptions, evaluating the magnitude of those exceptions and taking appropriate actions. So things around like even down to things like regulatory interpretation of some regulations, right? You need human judgment because context is important and humans are great at providing that context, right? So that's something we don't want to leave to automation. So first of all, like automation can support these decisions, but should not own them, right? So a good compliance as code model or a good automation model should make the human review more focused, right? So it shouldn't be about taking away human review entirely, but making it more focused, removing repetitive manual work, surfacing the right evidence, highlighting exceptions, and allow the leaders to make better decisions. So those are some of the areas that I feel that humans are still relevant, are not just relevant, are important, I should say.
Yeah, no, that's really a great point, Alex, there. So I can take a stab at like where you took not automated, and how like I'm going to take a stab at how the compliance as code concept really gets powerful, right? So let me give you one concrete example where I see a lot of industry is heading towards. So when you say a regulation changes, right, which we see mostly in our industry, say CMS updates some data handling requirement. Now you don't have to be doing that change everywhere. Instead, what you do is you update one of the corresponding AWS config rule, and AWS config is something that Daniel already brought up. So that rule now is codified, is version controlled, and you can deploy it across your entire environment automatically. So every resource in every account is evaluated against the new standards continuously and in real time. So now with the cloud formation and service control policies, you can enforce that no one can even deploy that infrastructure that violates the updated requirement, right? Now you are talking in terms of preventative instead of detective. So you are in a preventative, it's kind of all preventative. You will not like, oh, this is broken and now we're going to fix it. No, you are already preventing it from happening. So that's something that we can look at. And so when the auditor shows up, you are not scrambling for evidence. Your no- you are making an architecture such that it is compliant. So you have audit trail which are written. Cloud Trail is going to capture all your API calls. Config is recording every configuration change. And then Security Hub is aggregating all the findings. So when the auditor is there, you're not scrambling. You hand them a dashboard with all the continuous compliance history. So the key shift here is regulations become code that flow through your CI/CD pipeline as your application is flowing. So when the rule changes, the pipeline enforces it everywhere and immediately. So you have it when it is done. Does that kind of help you with automating the things?
No, that's very helpful, even for a person who doesn't automate a thing. So, no, this is great. And I want to understand, and I'm sure many of our audience would probably are picturing this too, like how does this look when all of this come to life? Can anybody share an example, how it plays out with your customers? Danielle, maybe you have an example that you could share?
Yeah, actually, when the client is compliant, you have to avoid, you have some rules that you need to management. That is crucial because, of course, you're going to integrate more services. You integrate a third-party application outside. Yeah, you need to bring your rules, like everything is encrypted. All the S3 buckets are version enabled. You have a policy for the S3 buckets. You have your database using KMS for encrypted ingress. Yeah, this is crucial because when you're already compliant, you want to be that compliance because you're going to need be compliant in a couple of years. And you need to bring that on the life of cycle of your developing team, your strategic team, everything, all the team on the company needs to know how to work because you need to have paperwork about all the documentation that it may be not in the process of the cloud is outside. You need to bring all this documentation for the auditor, and that is the thing. You need to be aware that your life cycle, your CI/CD, how do your deploying needs to work in the same time that you are like providing this documentation, especially when you are in a regulated industry like pharma industry or bank or things that is very like crucial for you. But yes, it's you need to integrate this in your day with all the developers and all the projects.
So let's shift gears a little bit. The greatest force right now we're experiencing AI. We've discussed compliance as a code and how it helps us keep up with regulation, but AI is coming in and it's here, it's strong. And we want to talk about how it's playing out in our industry. Maybe Snehal, I'll start off with you. Like, we know AI is everywhere in discovery, in clinical operations, in commercial. So how is AI making compliance more challenging? And how do you put the right guardrails around it? We want to discuss the challenge because opportunities, all of us know.
No, that's a great question, Nandini. So I'll take a stab and I'll take it in like parts here, the question, right? So AI introduces fundamentally different compliance challenges, right? Because the system's behavior now isn't fully deterministic. With traditional software, what happened is you could review the code and predict the output. It was straightforward. But with generative AI, the same input can produce different outputs. And some of those outputs may be biased, incorrect, or even non-compliant sometimes. So in healthcare, specifically with all this, I really see three biggest concerns right now. The first one is data governance. And what I'm going to do is with all these three things that I see, I'm going to talk about what that is and then how the tools can help. So the first one really is data governance. AI models, like in life sciences, as Nandini said, it often touches the PHI, right? It could be genomic data or clinical trial data. And now you need to prove that all the training data was properly consented, that inference doesn't leak any sensitive information, and that all the data residency requirements are met. So on AWS, when you are developing this, services like Amazon Bedrock, they run in your own VPC. Your data never leaves your environment, and model invocation logging through CloudTrail gives you a complete audit trail of your every interaction that you are doing. So really the first one as a concern I see is data governance, which you need to look at. The second one is really the explainability and hallucinations. So if an AI system recommends a treatment pathway or summarizes some kind of a clinical document, you need to trace how you got there, right? It can be just, oh, something came in, but how did you get there? So the biggest help that we've seen is the Bedrock guardrails, which lets you filter your responses. You can block the hallucinated content, or you can even enforce some topic boundaries saying, okay, this is how the boundary should look like. This is where you need to stop. And you can set the content policies that prevent the model from generating like off topic or, the potentially any harmful outputs. So I talked about data governance. The second one was explainability and hallucination. And the third important one is model governance. right? So you need, and you have different models every day, new things coming up. So you really need a version control on what models you are using, what prompts you are using. Are you changing the prompts at the back end? What are your guardrail configurations? Did something change? The same way, like how you version control your application code, you now want to do the version control for your whole model governance. So who changed the prompt template? When? Did it go through the review? These are all the questions the auditors are going to ask you. So you need your answers backed by all those immutable logs. So really, with all the three that I talked about, data governance, explainability, and hallucination, and the model governance, right? The guardrail framework is what you should be focusing on. And when I talk from the AWS perspective, it is really the bedrock guardrails, CloudWatch monitoring, and then IAM policies for access control, and the CloudTrail. All of these tools kind of gives you the good framework to start with.
Enjoyed learning that. It's such a good answer and so thorough and structured. So, anybody wants to talk about the AI artifact themselves, like the data training models or versions and prompts? We talked about that and output. Alex, Danielle, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, actually, when something I really like with Bedrock is you don't leave your VPC. This is crucial. This is very crucial because with we come with companies that say, okay, I wanted to use AI for my chat. I wanted to bring AI for my product. Okay, I'm going to contact with a third-party application outside. This traffic is going through old internet. Yeah, Bedrock have their own VPC, and the traffic is going to be in your VPC. You're going to control it. You know what is the policy of Bedrock, and who is the owner of this data. Because right now, data is the gold mine, right? Gold, really. Data right now with AI is gold with every industry, every company, and any app. And you need to know when you're starting to do this main set of compliancy is you need to bring these tools on when you're starting your product because when it's ready to be all live and you don't know okay I wanted to be compliant because I need to I don't know work with the other companies they need it and now do that change is going to be stressful. Yeah. You have like AWS Audit, you have all the tools from Amazon to back can be compliance in your architecture. Do it. It's not going to cost a lot of money. You're going to save money really in the end of the day. Do it. Yeah. That is the thing that you need to do if you want to be compliant.
So, where are we underestimating these risks, especially if we view it from governance lens? What do leaders need to prove internally before scaling AI, especially in our regulated industries? Um,
Uh,
like Snehal.
yeah, sure. So I think one of the areas that organizations are underestimating these risks, especially when you start to scale the use of AI enterprise-wide, right? So some of the factors that leaders fail to or don't fully pay attention to will be things like visibility. You don't know what you don't know. You can't govern AI use cases that you don't know that exist, right? So one of the things that leaders need to be able to do on this area is to have like a clear inventory of where AI is being used, almost like an AI use case inventory for those that might be familiar with having things like information asset inventories, right? So you need to know what data is involved with that AI model, what model or vendor you are using, what business decision that affects things like that. Another area is when it comes to risk classification, right? So not every AI use case carries the same level of risk, right? So if you compare an AI use case for say an internal productivity assistant versus an AI system that influences clinical workflows or patient communication, financial decisions, your governance model should reflect those different levels of risk that those AI use cases carry. Another level is control, right? So leaders need to be able to prove that the AI systems that they're using is properly controlled. So when I say control, I mean access to the AI system is properly managed, sensitive data is protected, the model behavior is monitored. Snehal mentioned something about these AI systems not being deterministic, so those behaviors need to be monitored. Outputs are reviewed where needed, right? And then exceptions are handled because it's not always going to be foolproof, right? Another area would be, I would say, auditability, right? So
Yeah.
Snehal touched a lot around this. So if the regulator or the auditor or the customer asks what happened, we need to be able to answer and reconstruct what happened, right?
Correct.
So we need to know what data went in. We need to know what model or version of the model was used. Now, how you talked about like a lot of these versions coming out, we need to have like a version control to know what model is being used, what output was generated. Was there a human reviewing that process? Where policy checks apply, things around that. So auditability is a huge part of that. And I would say I'll just add to that to say accountability, right? So
Yeah.
uh, AI governance isn't something that sits with just one person or one team. It's not going to be just owned by, say, the data science team or the security team. There has to also be, from the business level, business ownership with important input from different teams as well. So security, legal and compliance, engineering, even down to like operational monitoring. So those are some of those considerations that leaders need to take into account. But some other things I won't go down the rabbit hole, but some other risks that organizations might be missing is something called like the shadow AI, right? So you know, employees using AI systems that were not approved for workflows that were not information that was not classified for workflows that were not risk assessed or risk based. I mean, we've seen a lot of the news where organization data is leaked that were provided into some of these AI systems. Another thing is vendor dependency, right? So where you build critical workloads into using specific vendors, so now you're sort of locked into that vendor, and then you have like a huge vendor dependency risk there. So these are some of the risk areas and I would say considerations that leaders have to take into serious account when using AI in the systems.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you, Daniel, for bringing out the auditability. Really, when I think of auditability for AI-enabled systems, I really put it in the three layers, and you actually touched on all three of those. Is the first one input logging, right? Everything that you are going to able to capture your prompt, context window, who triggered invocation. So that's the input logging. The second one is the output monitoring. So continuously evaluate responses that you are getting. It could be for accuracy, compliance, content policies. Um, you want absence of hallucination claims and everything, right? So you need to really start with input logging, output monitoring, and the third one I think in my mind is really the feedback loops. So when a human reviewer is flagging any of the output, that signal should feed back into your guardrail configurations. So that's what is going to keep you in all the loops: input logging, output monitoring, and feedback loops. So when you think of auditability for all AI enabled systems, make sure you have all three of this in place. And um, that's how I start thinking in my mind.
Absolutely.
No, yeah, that's great. So I'm thinking, how do we realistically do all this? So, and where do we start?
Yeah, I mean, Nandini, that's a great question. Like, um, to summarize this all, really, it's not like, the big thing. We talk about everything. The three steps that I am now thinking after you ask me the question is how I am going to keep them all concentrated, right? So when you take, oh, it's not that everything that I have to do it in at the first go. So really, the first thing is turn on the visibility. into your, so monitoring, observability, it's important. If you cannot see anything, you are not able to automate. So you need to see, you need the visibility into what's happening in the environment. Really, how you would do it is enable your AWS config, CloudTrail wherever necessary, Security Hub. So this gives you the baseline inventory of your compliance posture on where you are today. And then you discuss on like where you want to take it in months, or how do you build the foundation from there. So have visibility, turn it on to where you really need it. Then you don't have to boil the ocean, like, start with everything. Take top 10 of your controls and codify them. So pick the highest risk compliance requirements, that the ones that are failing your audit, or you must have it. So take those up, use the automated config rules, the guardrails that are needed, and test it in the smaller environment. Prove that it works on a bounded scope, and then scale. And the third one, once you prove that it is working, embed that into your pipeline. So take those automated top 10 checks, integrate them into your CI/CD pipeline. So anything now you deploy, you are making sure it is passing your those top 10 controls. Now, this is the moment where compliance stop being a gate and starts being a capability. It's not the end gate now. It's into your CI/CD pipeline because you codified it. The developers are going to get all the instant feedback, your compliance team gets continuous evidence, and your auditors get on-demand proof. So really, three things: turn on visibility, start with your top 10 controls, and then embed it into your pipeline. Once this process works for your small bounded scope, scale it. Keep scaling. It could be more controls, it could be more applications, and you keep continuing to do that.
Yeah, I love that approach, Snehal. Like one of the things you mentioned that really resonates with me is really focusing, right? So picking a focused use case. Don't do everything. Like you said, don't boil the ocean. So
Yeah.
pick one important workflow. It could be one environment, or like you said, it could be top 10 controls, it could be one compliance framework, or it
Yeah.
could be one like painful evidence area that for getting evidences in this bucket, it's always painful, it's always tedious. Like pick one area, focus on it, codify it, implement in your CI/CD. And a lot of good places that organizations can start with some of these areas. If you're thinking about how to start to implement some of these recommendations, is one of it is access control. Like that's huge. Like a lot of compliance frameworks, dare I say all compliance frameworks, would have controls around access control, right? So
Yeah.
things like logging and monitoring, encryption, vulnerability management, even change management, actually. So all of these are areas that you can look at within your organization to say, where can we start to implement some of these approaches to see value. The first thing you want to do is to be able to prove the model. Once you're able to prove the model you've implemented works, then you can scale it up, right? Then you can go the full 9 years. But again, don't start by boiling the ocean.
Yeah.
True.
And actually, something I see in the engineering part is they have different security tools, you know? They have this one, they have the other one, different dashboards. And at the end of the day, this is going to be a problem for the engineer team to know what happened. Something I think really focus only one, the one is working for you. Yeah, if you're using some already tool that really want like thousand tools outside in the market, and you wanting to integrate this to your architecture, to your life cycle, do it. But take in mind using ones, because you are using different dashboard, different tools. It's going to be stressful for the team. It's going to be high cost. It's going to have more hours for your engineers to work and try to solve it. And that is the one of the keys, really using the one there that is focused for you, that you know that is in your budget. Use it. Yeah, but not buy the fancy ones because this is the new one, and next one using the other ones because it's going to be a chaos for you.
Yeah. No, it's so true.
This has been so fun. And you wouldn't believe we're already 40 minutes into our discussion. So maybe this is the time we take a little pause and go through some audience Q&A, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have some great questions coming in. Let me take a second to pull a few through. So the first question is for Alex. Alex, as organizations adopt third-party AI tools or foundation models, how do you extend your compliance framework to cover vendors you don't fully control?
That's a great question. And surprisingly, this is something that a lot of compliance frameworks and requirements already cover. So the only difference is now we are talking about AI services, right? So the first thing I want to say on this is you can outsource a capability to a vendor, to a third party, whoever, but you can't outsource the accountability, right? So the fact that a third party is doing something for you, you still have ownership of that process and oversight. So when an organization adopts a third-party AI tool, a foundational model, whatever the case is, your compliance framework then has to extend beyond your internal environment into the vendor relationship, right? So you want to start by, again, identifying what it is, doing an inventory and classification, what AI tools are being used, what data, what business processes do they support. Having that inventory is pretty critical, right? Then you move into the vendor risk. So you need to understand how the vendor handles data, whether your own data is used for training their models, where the data is stored, how long is it retained? You're talking about data retention policy. What subcontractors are involved, like beyond just the vendor. Are there other like people behind them that also interact with your data, right? So those are some of the things that you want to have clarity on. And then, of course, down to contractual, I would say controls, right? So you want to have clear terms around data usage. So one of the things that come up a lot in my experience is some organizations will say, hey, there are some companies where you can't negotiate your contractual agreements, like what they give you is what they get. But at the same time, you also have the responsibility of going through what terms they have around things like data usage, confidentiality, incident notification, audit rights, data deletion. Those are areas that you want to be able to ensure that you review for that third party and then run that through your risk management process and be sure that it's something that you're comfortable. But at the same time, contracts are not enough, right? So you need technical controls on the other side. So even when interacting with these third parties, where can you implement things like data minimization? Do we need to send them all this data, or do we need to send only data they need for these systems? Access controls, DLP, having things like encryption or login, output monitoring. We've talked about that a lot. So these are some of the areas that you can implement third party or vendor controls around outsourced or third party AI systems, and then of course topping all of that up with vendor governance. So it shouldn't be something you do at the point in time where you're onboarding them, but of course a continuous what some of us would say CDD, continuous due diligence or continuous monitoring, whatever the case is.
Next question. For leaders, and this is open to all, for leaders who's inheriting years of manual compliance debt, where do they start?
I say that enable AWS controls. Yeah, enable config, enable CloudTrail, enable Security Hub, enable VPC logs, enable all these things, because with this is like, so they say is you need to have visibility of what do you have. That is the first thing. You need to know what do you have. You need to know all this information is crucial because it's going to put on rails on what do you going to need. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. As I said, visibility is really important. Also, for the leaders, like when you turn on the visibility, usually it's been turned on for the entire org. But when you start the compliance debt, along with visibility, you could, as I said earlier, don't boil the ocean. Pick one workload or one compliance regulation framework or one compliance framework at a time. Automate the evidence for that single scope. Don't try to modernize everything in one go. Like keep it a compliance program in one initiative. Like if you're going to do everything in one initiative, you're going to stall. So that's not what you want to do. You start, pick a workload, pick a compliance framework, make sure it works, prove it works, show your leadership that for this one workload you can produce audit evidence on demand instead of scrambling for like a couple weeks before the review. And then once you show that it is working, then expand. The pattern is always scope bounded, prove value, organizational buy-in, and broader adoption, and keep scaling. So I think with visibility, if you could get the buy-in with this bounded scope and then continue to scale, I think that goes really well with a lot of industries out there.
Next question is, what's a leading indicator that compliance as a code initiative is working before you ever face an audit? If we can even draw some examples from our case studies or use cases, that'll be great too.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, one leading indicator that your compliance as code implementation is working, I would say, is that control failures or exceptions are being found during your normal delivery or during what we call BAU, business as usual, not when you're preparing for an audit, right? So if your compliance as code implementation initiative is working, your team would not need to wait for an auditor or for an audit to discover that, login was missing here, or encryption was misconfigured, or some S3 bucket was made public, or some access was excessive. Those would naturally show up in the workflow, right? Again, if you've properly implemented your compliance as code, all of these requirements are things that your pipeline or your workflow would help you identify. So another indicator is when you see reduced manual evidence chasing, right? So you are not having to go through each requirement and manually go fetch the evidence and store in some repo. Your workflow already helps you demonstrate your compliance to a specific control or requirement, or already helps you automatically collect that evidence. So a key one I would say again is when you see reduction in that manual effort or manual evidence chasing, you will start to, you can, that's a huge indicator that your compliance as code is working.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, pretty much keep it up. You can see that it is in the preventive approach versus in the detective mode. So, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
So believe it or not, we are almost coming at time. But before we close here, I do want to do a quick final round of questions. And I want to ask each one of you one single takeaway that you want this audience to take away today from this discussion. So we'll start with Alex.
Yeah, for me, I think the main thing is one thing: build compliance into the workflow, not around it, not after, but into the workflow, right? So many organizations don't have to choose between speed and control. Like these can work hand in hand. They can complement each other depending on how well or how you've built your compliance processes and where you've chosen compliance to live. So for me, that's the key takeaway.
Snehal?
Yeah, no, thank you. Really, I think of it, compliance and innovation are not opposing forces. The organizations I see moving fastest in healthcare are the ones that kind of embed the compliance in their architecture from day one. It is automated, continuous, and provable on demand. So really, I'm going to summarize what I said earlier. Start with visibility, codify your highest risk controls, and make compliance a CI/CD pipeline capability, not a project end gate. So just want to say it like the technology exists today to do all this. The only barrier is declining to start. So let's make sure that compliance and innovation are joining hands and not as opposing forces.
Great.
And for my side, I think one of the things is enforce the policy, don't you generate alerts. Yeah, you can have a list of vulnerabilities, but you need to have enforce your policies. Why? Because with you enforce your policies, you know that your compliance is working. Yeah, like don't put a S3 bucket public. You can create a policy for that. You can create a policy for use KMS. Use their policy, especially if you're using AWS. Use your policy, use your config, use that tools that are going to, believe me, save your life if something happens.
That's great. So go ahead. Did
Yeah,
you want
no,
to?
I was resonating with what Daniel said, like absolutely. And these are the things we see all the time at Modus, right? And we've had like multiple clients with in this situation where we've had to come in and sort of help, even like from scratch, helping to build out compliance programs that are repeatable and are sustainable and that scales, right? So both from a technical side and also down to the governance side, these are things that our team has excellence experience with or experience in, and we've done across multiple clients in the healthcare industry and many other regulated industries.
That's great. With that, I would say, Snehal, Alex, Danielle, I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. I loved being part of it too. So thank you for that. And we are at the end. It's time to wrap up, but I hope the conversations continues outside of this platform and today's discussion. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you to Amazon and Modus and Fears for bringing us together, and thank you to our audience for taking an hour and sharing that hour with us. With that, a recording along with additional resources will be in your inbox in the next 24 hours. And until next time, I'm Nandini Kashyap. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Nandini, and thank you, Daniel, Alex.
Yep.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Bye.
everyone.